Yeah, I mean, I think you're right to think that there's positives in younger generations. Younger people are often countercultural, and who knows, but there might be a sort of a reaction to generations past and the low view of marriage that perhaps has been, or the increasingly low view, to be replaced with a higher view of I'm not going to go down, not going to go down the same route. So I think there is definitely there's reasons to be optimistic.
Well, Kieran Kelly, it's an absolute joy to talk to you. I've known you for years, and it's a real privilege to know you now as the new director of the Christian Institute. And so, first of all, congratulations for that. Do you feel any different?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I feel the loss, of course,
Yeah, yeah,
of
yeah,
Colin,
yeah.
but the work continues, and I know that he would want what we're doing here to continue, and we're seeking to sort of continue not his legacy so much as he would always have pointed to our Lord Jesus Christ as the instigator and the author and perfecter of this work. So, but we want to continue to honour him, and in doing that, we'll honour Colin. But I think day to day, I there's new responsibilities, of course.
For people who don't know, Christian Institute are, a leading Christian campaign organisation, championing what the Bible says is true, a rallying place for Christians to come around, defending the truth in the context of the culture, all those sorts of things. I would encourage anybody who doesn't already know you to pop across to your website. We'll pop it up. You, of course, were Colin's deputy. And for those of you, again, who don't know, Colin was, of course, the former chair of the Coalition for Marriage in March this year, 2024. Sadly, he died. Our supporters come from All Faiths and None. And the thing that links us together as organisations is the defence of marriage as being between a man and a woman, and that from a Christian point of view is something you would defend as an organisation. We would defend it, although I am a Christian. Our supporters come from All Faiths and None, as I've said, and we would defend it also from the secular evidence base, because it's very, very clear that yes, other things happen in a secular society. Liberal democracy, of course they do. We know they do. But when it comes to a population basis and what's good for society, man-woman marriage deserves promoting. And that's where we have a really strong link. So you mentioned Colin, and you mentioned all the work he'd done in setting up C4M and with others, and all the effort that went on there, which was marvellous. What did he leave us to do? What's still on the table? Why do we exist in your mind?
What Colin left us with, I suppose, is getting to understand why marriage is such a big deal, and you've articulated that really well in just in a few words, Tony. This connection between undermining marriage, undermining of family, biological sex. So he got a nation, I think it's fair to say, to think about the significance of that. He wasn't the only one, but he was certainly, as far as C4M goes, he was the major driving force. So that's the difference that he made in terms of marriage. In terms of your question about what he's left us with, or the challenges he's left us with, I guess, is to maintain momentum, because, as you would know, we live in this world which sort of says, do you know what? The world's moved on. No one's thinking about that anymore. No one's talking about that anymore. What is it? What is it with your obsession with man-woman marriage, with real marriage? And in a world that is clamouring for people's attention, the challenge for us now is to make our voices heard in that world. A world where tolerance becomes, you must agree, you must affirm, you must say the same thing as me. And if you don't, as C4M supporters wouldn't, because of the right position they take on marriage, that is to set you out as being hostile in some way and what have you. So I think the legacy he left is about how important an issue this is, and its ramifications for all areas of society, really, and the challenges to maintain momentum on continuing to make people see just how important that is.
You're absolutely right there. That his legacy has left us to contend with, and the fact that he's established us, which is great. Include well, of course, we've had two redefinitions of marriage. Firstly, to include same-sex marriage, to remove gender from marriage, and we've seen what's happened when you disconnect human sexuality with human biology. You follow down that continuum, and well, we know full well where that's taken us as a society. But then also redefined again to have so-called no-fault divorce. So actually you can just get out of the popular phrase that you've used and that we've used is you can get out of a marriage easier than you can get out of a mobile phone contract. Tell me a little bit about the work that CI are doing around the ongoing work, because you're right, it's not a finished conversation, is it? A lot of people would say that's done, that's gone, move on, life has changed. No. Why is it important that we don't move on and accept that?
Yeah, and if there's one message I think people should take away from this conversation between you and me today, is that the conversation is ongoing, and so no one should be in any doubt. It's not a time to hide away or to shrink away. Their voice is still important, and it's very easy to sort of get disheartened, I think, about that. But yeah, that's hugely important. I mean, there's areas of work that we do at the Christian Institute where marriage comes and our view on marriage and the significance of our view on marriage comes into real stark force. I mean, upholding the truth on marriage is still a significant issue. That's, as we've just been saying. But in terms of where the rubber hits the road, just recently, I could think of a couple of cases, legal cases, that we've been dealing with, where there was a case of a street preacher. We helped both cases are in Scotland as it happens, but it would be relevant elsewhere. A street preacher called Angus Cameron, who was preaching on the streets, again recognising that your audience is all faith and none, but our clients are Christian clients, and an accusation was made of homophobic hatred. It wasn't substantiated in any kind of way, and the connection obviously between homophobic hatred and upholding the traditional view or the biblical view on marriage is a significant one. It's a strong one. There's a strong connection that people say that to take the view that we take, that you and I would take, is necessarily to be demonstrating homophobic hatred. So this accusation was made, and he was arrested. It took some time before he was released, and those charges were dropped. There was a non-crime hate incident logged against him for a period of time to work to get that removed. And so he was vindicated in the end. Of course he was. But you had to go through a process before that happened. And you'll know well that so often the case is it's the process that's the punishment for people. But another case would be a chap called Kenneth Ferguson. He was, I'm glossing over detail here, but he was essentially sacked because he went to a church which had the same view on marriage and same-sex marriage that you and I and your supporters would have. He was basically sacked because he went to that kind of church, and again there was a legal process, and there is this sort of expectation that people can be treated with impunity, and so it's important to take these cases. I mean, your question was about the sort of how our work kind of is significant in this space, and it's important to take these cases because it reminds that watching world that actually C4M supporters and CI supporters and people who and others who hold this view on marriage have a right to make that view known, and it's an important, and in a democratic and free society, they shouldn't be oppressed or have legal action taken against them or lose their job or whatever it might be because they hold and express that view. And we're operating in this climate where there is certain pressures on free speech. So these cases are important in stopping that sort of chilling effect where people start to self-censor being added to. So that's encouraging in that sense, but let's be frank, there's no room for complacency.
No, there isn't. And the irony is that the law is, in fact, more often than not, on the side of those who want to express their view that marriage should be between a man and a woman.
Absolutely.
It's explicitly defended in the law.
Yes.
But you're right, so many people are scared off by the process, by the fact that they will be attacked by hate mobs on social media, and even worse sometimes. Kieran, I find it hard, right? Because a lot of our policymakers, a lot of our politicians, if the fact of the matter is that 90% of the wealthiest mums are married, only 20% of the poorest mums. So the people who are leading the cultural expression are more often enjoying the benefits of marriage. And they know that it brings about the best version of the next generation. They know how good it is for kids compared to the alternatives. And that's not to say that sometimes marriages don't work out. Of course they don't. And sad things happen, and we know that. But on a population basis, it brings about great improvements in society and for individuals and for kids. Why is it the case that they're so reluctant in that case to talk about it? I mean, before you answer, if you look at the debate around what you should and shouldn't eat, nobody says, well, we're not going to talk about those food groups in case some people feel offended. It's ridiculous. So what's going on?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is it's just, I mean, obviously, I follow these conversations that you have with others, Tony, and that's the point that you've just made is a point about the data, is a point that you make regularly, and I just want to really encourage that and encourage people who watch week to week. That is such an important message, and it bears repeating. And I think you're right. I think you're right to keep repeating it. So I just wanted to say that. So just in case of the why, well, I mean, we see this in other areas of society that a narrative takes hold, and it becomes increasingly costly to put an alternative view, even where the data supports that alternative view. You become an outlier, and for people in public life and politicians, they count the costs, and they usually, not in every case, but often decide that the cost price isn't worth paying, or they don't even get to look at the data or choose not to look at the data because they already have it in their mind about what the outcome's going to be. Now, I mean, I can't remember the woman's name, but I think she was a US researcher, and I'm going back a few years now. But I remember that she started to look into data. I think it was to do with divorce, coming with an expectation that it sort of didn't really matter, and that the mantra of a good breakup is fine, and that sort of stuff, which is another one of those narratives that's taken hold that doesn't really bear out in the data, which is exactly what she found. So she came into it. She wasn't coming in it from a faith perspective, I don't think, purely as a data scientist, really, and had her world rocked because she recognised that the data didn't support her preconceptions and her presuppositions. The data actually said what you've been saying. But it takes a brave person to admit that, particularly in the face of what we know is the hostile environment in which that message will come out. So I think there's certainly a lack of bravery, perhaps a lack of honesty in people. They're just not being prepared to say, yeah, the data is what the data is. And I think so much of that is to do with this idea that if you advocate something, as we advocate for marriage, and I'm sure you will have heard this and people have said this to you, I've certainly had it, that if you advocate for it, you are necessarily, in the mere advocacy of it, you're necessarily putting down people, condemning people, belittling people whose marriages have broken down, let's say. And of course that's not true, but that's the argument, you see, and that lack of nuance that we see, or that lack of rational and objective thought around some of what has become controversial issues, you see that time and time again. So the very fact, there would be some people, Tony, wouldn't there, that the very fact that we're having this conversation would necessarily be anti this group and anti that group.
Yeah, which is so ironic because, the idea is, well, we live in a liberal democracy, we get that. And that there is a conversation about the church and what it regards as sin or not sin. And that's a whole other conversation. And indeed, it gets confused by church leaders actually ignoring their own agreed doctrinal basis and saying something otherwise. Let's not go down that route just now. But how important would you say, so kind of where we overlap in that sense, if you like, encouraging churches to get back to telling their people that marriage is good, and saying marriage is good isn't meant to offend people who are single or people who are divorced, as you're saying, but B, also actually promoting it as a social good. And if you really look at the data, if you're really concerned about promoting society, about the well-being of adults, about the well-being of children, and even tangentially all sorts of other things that you'll be interested in, the level of abortion, that sort of stuff, the thing to do is promote marriage, because it seems to be statistically in that environment all those things are taken care of. So how important is it to encourage church leaders to encourage their people to get back to focusing on the importance of marriage?
Yeah, well, of course it's important. I mean, and let's be frank. There are many churches who would have exactly the right view of marriage, understand its significance, understand it biblically. But I think there's probably fewer but still many who would talk about the benefits of it socially. And I think that's where I think there is work, and that's where C4M can be so important. CI too, but certainly just CI can speak to churches and get them to see this connection. The fact that marriage wasn't just given to Christians, right? It was
Yep.
it was given to
That's
to
right.
the world.
Yeah.
C4M has a set of knowledge and understanding that can reach let's call it a more secular group of people who and I think if in approaching both those fronts, I think then the church can start to see, well, actually, there is a receptive voice for the kind of things that we've been saying. There's people who are perhaps challenging us, as C4M can do in terms of challenging churches which are less clear on it. But yeah, I mean, we have Christians believe that there's that God's good design is for all society. So marriage has got to form a part of that. I mean, it's absolutely fundamental.
Yeah, and logically speaking, if God is God and says something is good, there will be ample evidence in the secular literature to say that it is, and in fact that is there.
Yeah.
It strikes me, looking at what's going on around us though, Kieran, and just the distance of so many young people from these things, and even this conversation, that it's almost like we need to start further back. And before we talk about marriage, we talk about learning about personal responsibility, learning about the fact that caring about other people might be more important than expressing your own needs and desires, which seems to be the zeitgeist today. How much interaction do you have? How much effect do you have? How much impact do you have on getting a message out to schools, maybe, that actually it might be a good idea to teach kids about responsibility, to teach kids about character, to teach kids about, dare I even say, morality, as almost like building the building blocks, which then point to things like marriage and commitment later on?
Yes, it was a really good point. So in terms of our advocacy work, we're not working directly with school kids, but what we are doing in terms of our education department, we're working with their parents and their teachers and some of their governors, and advocating for marriage at the, if you like, think of it, the national level or the level of the curriculum. And what we've seen again and again is that erosion, that downgrading, Tony, where you talk about various family types or what have you, where marriage barely gets a look in, and so we'll be there saying kids need to hear this, need to hear the positives of marriage. I mean, I think one of the things that we can really push on with is making this positive case for marriage that you've talked about, and so that advocacy work enables that message to go out when we sort of say, well, hang on, there's in amongst these different family types, marriage is still a massive part of that, right? So you want to be telling kids about it, and obviously from a Christian perspective, we think it is a good in and of itself. But certainly there's all these people who are married. You need to be teaching kids about it. You can't exclude it just because you're teaching about other family types. It's a positive message, and schools are required to sort of teach objectively and without sort of a political kind of bent. And that doesn't just mean party political. That kind of incorporates these kind of political views, like views on same-sex marriage. So they're required to incorporate that into their thinking. Many schools are required to consult with parents on this. So, parents who are watching or listening, you can make your voice for marriage known directly with your school. None of that needs to be done. Let's just be clear. None of that needs to be done in an adversarial way. It doesn't need to be done in a combative way. It can be done and should be done in a very reasonable way. And the reason we can be reasonable is because all the data supports the things that we're saying. So if you want to be objective about these things, head teacher, then look at this. This is a view that at the very least should have a look in.
Yeah. And it's that, so you would say it's that issue of grace seasoned with salt.
Of course, yes.
So you're polite and you're gracious, but actually there's substance to your conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really important that just people understand what they can do, understand the issue and understand what they can do, and then do something.
Yeah, then do something. And that's right. And in fact, I get the privilege of going around the country and talking to many of our supporters, and many of them are teachers, and they say, look, we're stuck because if we speak up, we lose our jobs, but parents don't. So if parents could speak up, that would be great.
And teachers shouldn't be frightened either, Tony. Let's be clear about this. They have if teachers were being told that just by advocating marriage in the sense of teaching it as in amongst some other things, and they might have to teach some other things as well, but they shouldn't be losing their jobs. They should get in touch with us.
Absolutely right.
If they need some assistance on that.
You've raised some really positive things there. I think there are some green shoots, and indeed the research indicates that young people still want to get married. The majority of young people still want to get married. They're leaving it till later. So they're treating it as what you call a capstone instead of a cornerstone, and missing out on the benefits and the advantage of getting married earlier on in life and building a life together and saving all the, if nothing else, saving the rental costs. But, there are so many other benefits of getting on earlier in life. And I think I am a pathological optimist, and I think the outlook is good because I think many of these other things will burn themselves out. But the message I get from so many people is that there's a requirement upon us all to look after our own marriages. And you mentioned it yourself, to set examples such that the young people around us look at us and say, yeah, I want some of that because that looks good. That looks like the way to live. And that seems to be the way, to win this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right to think that there's positives in younger generations. Younger people are often countercultural, and who knows, but there might be a sort of a reaction to generations past and the low view of marriage that perhaps has been, or the increasingly low view, to be replaced with a higher view of I'm not going to go down the same route. So I think there's reasons to be optimistic. I suppose. And you'll know this as well as anyone. The areas of pressure, I suppose, that you see these days is having redefined it, as you said, twice, and redefining that is between a man and a woman, and redefining the for life aspects of it. There is pressure, isn't there, Tony, on the bill in the middle about the exclusion of all others, and this pressure to recognise polygamy and recognise thruples and recognise those kind of things. So there's lots to be positive about. We just need to be mindful of that sort of negative pressure,
and also to give legal rights to cohabitees.
Yeah.
Which again is, you think, well, that's a little bit bonkers. So how would you prove that you're cohabitees? Maybe you'd have to, I don't know, make a promise to each other and sign a document. Oh, don't we already have that? It really is. It's almost anything but marriage, but yet marriage is the thing which will survive. So often I refer to Kimberly L's book, The Invincible Family. I think it is, because it's a thing that works, and it's a thing that people look at and say, yeah, I want some of that. And we just have to shout louder.
So from my perspective, of course, and I know this won't be shared by everyone who's watching this, but from my perspective, of course, marriage is a God-given thing. So of course it's going to work and be good.
Absolutely. Kieran, look, I'm so grateful You are the man for this job at this time, and I'm really pleased that you're doing it. I'm so grateful for the work that CI does. A lot of our supporters will know how good you are. A lot won't realise that the work you do changes their lives for the better in terms of its influence on the legal system and so many other parts of our culture. So thank you. Keep up the brilliant work. It's very early days for you. Once you've got your feet under the desk and there are some more knotty issues for us to deal with, which there are coming around the corner, it would be great to talk to you again. But Kieran Kelly, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Tony. It's been a pleasure, and keep it up. And I'd say that to your supporters as well. Just keep up the good work. We've got a good message, haven't we? That marriage is between a man and woman to the exclusion of all others for life. It's truth, and it's a truth that's worth standing up for.